talking today about what it looks like to cast vision and to be vision keepers. And so we're grateful that you're here and listening in, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So, Leon, one of the questions that I encounter all the time from folks who are just getting started to folks who really have been in this thing for a while, they ask the question, how do we do this thing called philosophy? How is it that we get to a place where we decide what we're about and what direction we're going to go? And so I just want to invite you to speak to us out of your personal experiences and kind of where those have taken you. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I remember early on as a children's pastor trying to figure out what it is that I needed to do to be effective in children's ministry. And I remember struggling with the battle of the newest thing out there, trying to figure out what I should do in my ministry, and then beginning to realize that there was a question I hadn't considered. And the question was, how do I go about helping to transform the lives of my kids? How do I help them fall in love with God and have this vibrant relationship with Him? And of course that led me to another question that I had to answer first, and that was, are kids really capable of that kind of vibrant relationship with God? And so once I settled that question, and the answer was definitely a yes, then I began wondering and evaluating the things I was doing and asking the question, are these things helping my kids grow in their walk with God? And so after I began to realize that that's my focus, not exciting programs, not great new curriculum, but transforming the lives of my students, transforming the lives of my kids, then that gave me an avenue to begin evaluating the things I was doing. So for instance, instead of the traditional Easter egg hunt at Easter time that so many of our churches do, and I was doing, I began to ask the question, is this Easter egg hunt helping my kids grow in their relationship with God? And I had to be honest with myself and say the answer was no, it wasn't. Not that there was anything wrong with the Easter egg hunt, but it gave me a way to evaluate that event where I could say, how can I either eliminate this event and do something else, or change the event in such a way that it does transform the lives of my kids? So at that point, this was years ago, and the resurrection eggs were brand new, to the scene, and so I began incorporating that into the event, having the kids actually tell the gospel story, and realize that now this ministry that I have been a part of not only is fun, but now it's life transforming. And so having a philosophy, determining what it is you're trying to accomplish, which for all of us, I think should be transforming the lives of kids, helping them to fall in love with God, now informs everything I do. So I have to go back to that philosophy and say, does this ministry help me accomplish that? Quizzing is another example. Great program, great form to learn Scripture, but if they're only learning the words of Scripture and not knowing what to do with it and how it transformed their lives and how they apply it at school and on the playground, then maybe we're not doing all that we need to do to help accomplish that philosophy of transforming kids' lives.
So what I'm hearing you say is that that it's really important for us to look at the why we do what we do.
Absolutely.
Before we look at the what we
right.
do what we
and
do.
Once you've discovered what the why is, it is freeing for everything else. Now I don't have to worry about the newest fad that's coming out in children's ministries. Do I need to have this great set in my worship area? Do I need to spend $10,000 on VBS in order to get all the kids in my community to come to my church? It now becomes, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Does this ministry accomplish that? And so I don't have to worry about what they're doing down the road at the church down the road. I just do what God has called me to do in transforming the lives of kids.
Very good. Anybody have anything you want to add to that? Well, thanks. That helps us to think about, as we establish whether we are brand new in this journey or whether we've been on it for a while, to maybe to stop regularly and ask ourselves the question, why do we do what we do? Before we spend a lot of time thinking about what we will do. Thank you. Very good. We've been hearing from Dr. Leon Blanchette, and he is a professor at Olivet and also has the privilege of working with young worshipers on Sunday morning and helping them to know Scripture and to fall in love with this God we speak of. So thank you. You know, Jen, I have conversations on a regular basis with folks who say, I really don't feel like I have a voice. I really don't think anybody's really cares about what I think. As a matter of fact, I sometimes feel powerless in terms of I've got this vision living inside of me, and I've got these great direction and plans, but I don't really feel like I have a platform. Talk to us a little bit about what it looks like to be a people of influence and folks who are helping to bring vision to the table.
Sure. Well, I know personally I found myself in that place before, just feeling like I thought I really knew what we should be doing, and even wanting great ideas for our kids and for our volunteers and our parents, but really not even sure how to say it or where to say it or how to make that happen. And I think I learned that it was about two things. One is that the way that we communicate it really matters. You know, someone said a long time ago to me, they said, if people knew that the Titanic was going to go down, I don't think anyone would have got on it. You know, and so if we're always going around talking about the negative aspects, the things that are going wrong, the places that we're desperate for help, or, nothing's working or no one's hearing us. And if we are this negative voice, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to be a part of it, So if we become these positive voices who are willing to do whatever we can to constantly put this positive philosophy in front of our people, then more and more want to hear it, and more want to be a part of that, and more are willing to serve and to believe in it. And so really making sure that once we know what it is that we're about, what it is we believe, then being as positive as we can and speaking that often. The other thing is realizing that we all have platform in all different areas. And every time that we speak, every time we're handed a mic, every time we're given a place at the pulpit, that we should be intentional with what it is we're saying. Sitting around a staff table, every time we have conversation, whatever it is that we care about, whatever it is our philosophy that's driving us, we need to continue to speak it. And I think it's really important for us to be clear. And if we have all of these things that we're about, and we're all over the place, then that's a lot of stuff to be talking about. But if we can narrow the focus and narrow down our philosophy and be able to speak it clearly, and everything keeps coming back to these couple of things, then people hear it better. And what's awesome is that I think the more you talk about it and the more you communicate in a positive way, then you begin to hear people, and whether it's your kids in ministry, whether it's the people that serve with you, whether it's the pastors that you partner with, I hear them using the same language, or they have buy-in. And so I think it's really important for those two things, to be positive when you communicate your philosophy, and the second is to recognize all the different platforms, the places that we really do have areas of influence, and be mindful to be our best about that.
Yeah, and there's nothing more rewarding than when you're walking around, you're hearing people speak your language. They're using your terminology, they're using they're catching the vision of what you're trying to accomplish, and they join in with you in that.
They buy into your excitement, like you said, when you're being positive. When you are excited about something, even if you feel like you don't have a strong voice, and even if you feel like not a lot of people are listening, when you're super excited and super passionate about something, then people, they can't help but at least hear what you have to say, because you're speaking from a place of passion, and you're not just reading from a list. You're speaking from your heart about something that you can't help but talk about. It's like you're gushing, you're overflowing with something that really, really matters to you. And when you're talking about anything that really, really matters to you, then people want to hear it. People want to hear something that you're excited about.
It's true. At the beginning there, we were hearing from our pastor, Jen Ballenger, who serves at Newark Church of the Nazarene, and as one also who influences young worshipers and their families, and others who are investing in the lives of children. And so thank you. And Kyle Tyler serves at Bethany First Church of the Nazarene, with young worshipers, with our children and families, and so thanks for weighing into that. One of the mentors in my life talks about that as long view. That when we say the same things the same way over a long period of time, that it begins to kind of sink into our soul. And before long, we hear ourselves repeating back, kind of parroting those ideas and traditions and patterns. And it's very much like when we're raising our children in our home, and our children hear us over and over again, kind of saying the same things and repeating patterns and traditions around the table. And perhaps they know that first everybody will sit down, and then everybody will maybe hold hands, and then we will say a prayer. Maybe someone will be selected, or we'll say one together. They know our patterns and traditions, and no one has to say to them, after a very short time, this is what we're going to do next. But instead, they begin to take the lead because they own it as if it was their very own idea. And it's a beautiful thing when the folks in our faith communities begin to say with passion, I believe this, and I live it, and I pass it along. That long view vision helps us to pass along this passion.
And that living it was a big part of what you just said, because if we tell our kids that we're going to sit around at the table and we're going to pray and we're going to hold hands before every meal, but we just say it, then that they're not going to catch the vision for that. But like you said, we're not only casting a vision to our people, but we're living it out, because they don't just catch it. It doesn't just catch on when we say it over and over and over. It catches on when they see it in action. Yeah. And seeing it in action is part of that long view. So it doesn't take a week to get a vision and a philosophy in place and really get people to buy into it. You can talk about it for a week, but it takes living it and doing it for that long view. You got to spend some time on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would say along that same vein, the family table has taken on a lot of different looks. Sometimes it's in a restaurant. Sometimes it's not at a traditional table that we think of. What we're really talking about is the patterns and traditions that we develop through gathering. And one of the places that takes place is at the family table. And it's a place where everyone has a seat. Everyone is invited. Everyone belongs. And we don't worry about that. We don't even think about making that developmentally appropriate, except serving what would help our babies not choke, and serving what we might like to take in. But the patterns and traditions that we build by gathering help to teach what we believe, what we practice, what we're about. Well, I have a question for you, Trey. As we think about this idea of philosophy and vision and living it out, and what it looks like to kind of help teach a people that this is what we're about. Talk to us for a minute about what it looks like to be the new guy. That when you step into a brand new faith community, and actually things are going well, and vision has been cast, and things are in place, and you got leaders, and you begin to step in, and all of the sudden God begins to give you something fresh and something new, and how do you begin to live inside of that community and vision?
I am new. I've been at my church for about 5 months, and I think what's important for me is through the process of interviewing and going through that is seeing why I do what I do personally, like Leon talked about, why I do what I do personally. How does that fit with the faith community that I'm talking with? And as we lined up, we weren't the same, but as we lined up and I saw that we are being called together to serve me and the church, I think one of the first things that I did is my very first week there, I made an appointment with everyone on the children's leadership team. I wanted to know personally from them, what is the vision as you've heard it? Why do we do at Central what we do? And I wanted to do that with them individually, because I didn't want groupthink. I wanted to know from them, why are we doing what we do? And why do we do this event? Why do we use this for this gathering? Why? And as I gathered them together, they were on the same page. And that was exciting to hear as we moved forward. Also in that gathering, I was able to gather some really helpful information. I asked them 4 questions. I asked them, what are our strengths as children's ministry? What are our weaknesses? Out of what you do, what do you like? And what do you really not like? That just kind of comes with your responsibility. So those 4 things let me know why we do what we do. And then as I shared with who I am and that I feel God has called us to teach kids to hear and obey, and for their parents to walk alongside them, we were able then to move forward with what I am called and what they as a leadership team are called to do.
And I think you touched on a real important concept, is the hear and obey. You know, so much oftentimes when we're teaching, whether it be children's ministries or any other area of teaching, we teach oftentimes for knowledge. And really, if we follow the example of Jesus in the New Testament, Jesus didn't teach for knowledge. He taught so that the knowledge would lead to obedience. And even for the Old Testament Hebrew, you didn't know something unless you did it. If you didn't do it, you don't know it. And so part of that philosophy that we talked about earlier is helping kids move from learning information, learning data, being able to reproduce the data, to living it out in their lives. So now when they're at the playground at school, they're remembering, this relates back to what I learned at church, and it influences the way I interact with this friend of mine. So the knowing and doing thing that you mentioned is outstanding.
I think that also relates to what you're just talking about, is as you begin to cast vision with your team, and even in a new location, you know, if we came in and we just said, this is who I am, this is what I care about, this is what we're going to do, they wouldn't be nearly as receptive if you actually heard from them where they are, what they believe in, and then how you can do this together and bring them intentionally with you. So again, not just that teaching or not just talking about it, but actually doing life with people and getting to hear people's heart and how you fit together as a team to then bring them, so you're moving forward together. And I think that's really important to, not just speak it, but to, communicate it in a way that you're doing it together so that there's more buy-in. So I think that's really good.
Well, thanks. We're hearing from Trey Brooks, who serves at Central Church in Lenexa, Kansas. And he, too, has the privilege of investing in young worshipers, but also their families and leaders who are making that investment as well. And so thanks for your thoughts there. Kyle, I have attended a lot of conferences through the years. Been to CPC and Ignite and different kinds of conferences that are offered, and I'm always anticipatory when I go. Maybe at a place that I feel hungry or drained or out of creative resource. And while I gather lots of good information while I'm there, I have consistently come away with a real similar kind of dilemma. And that is, I feel a little bit like a freak, and have maybe sat down with my mentor, maybe after every time, and just said, sometimes I wonder if I'm in the wrong role. I hear my colleagues talk about some of the things that they're doing, and I think, oh, I'm not doing that. Oh, I am not doing that. Oh, I'm not that creative. Oh, we've never done that. And sometimes I listen to them and I feel exhausted as I hear some of the things that they're doing, and it's like so fantastic and so exciting. And I know kids and families are drawn to that. But as I sit with my mentor, one of the things that I hear him say is, Margaret, remember who you are. Remember who you are. And that is, it's encouraging for me as I think about all the places we could chase.
Yeah.
And I have been guilty of, reading a book and laying it down going, okay, that's going to be me. Or attending a class and then checking that off my list and going, okay, that's going to be me. But what is it like for us to remember who we are? I heard a terminology recently that talked about mission drifting, that we would move away from the mission that really drives us, that we find ourselves passionate about. And so, Kyle, talk to us just a little bit about what does it look like to avoid being distracted?
I think, like Dr. Blanchette said, the smartest man in the room, I think when he said that there's freedom within form, like jazz. You set up the form that is your philosophy and of ministry, and then you find freedom within that. And so having that in place, there's a reason we asked this question like further down the list, because the other things we talked about before are super important. Having that philosophy of ministry firmly in place is going to help as when you go to those sorts of keeping up with the Joneses, or they have a playground in their sanctuary churches, like when you go to those sort of situations, and when you know your philosophy, and you know what you're trying to accomplish, what the vision that God's given you for your ministry, then you can see all these things and feel free to know that to know where you're headed. And so when you see this cool new curriculum or this awesome new activity, you've got a norm to go back to. You have a system to go back to where you can say, does this fit with who we are? Because nobody knows your culture like you know your culture. When you go to those things and there are people that are offering all these, free pins and kush balls, which are awesome. When you're collecting all that stuff, they know their stuff and they've got amazing products, but you know your people and you know your culture and you know what your people need. And so maybe their curriculum is exactly what is going to fit. That's the puzzle piece you've been missing to really bring together your Sunday morning, your midweek, or whatever you're looking for. But or maybe just because it's a super cool curriculum, maybe that it doesn't fit who you are or where you're headed or your style, and that's okay. And you don't have to have those sorts of feelings like you were talking about if you know who you are, if you know what your philosophy is like. And so part two of that, I would say, would be formalizing your philosophy. I think it's important to, if you're like me and it's like in my brain is a jumble of philosophy and theology like pounding into one another, and I could try to explain it, but it's going to come out in a whole lot of words until finally it becomes succinct. And so when I can sit down and put it on paper and formalize my philosophy where it's something that's easy to understand, then that helps me to communicate it and it helps people to receive it. And so if you kind of have that in place when you already have that in your head, then that doesn't mean you have to create like a 1990s 5-point mission statement or anything, but just like if you just got a succinct thing that you can go back to say, man, at BFC, that's where I serve. At BFC, our whole vision and philosophy is around you belong. by helping kids feel like they belong at church, and then it helps them feel like they belong with God, and it helps them feel like they belong in a faith community. And so I belong, you belong, we belong is what it all comes back to, and that's really succinct. But by having that, I can communicate that to other people, to my team, and then I have just something succinct to go back to in my head. And so when I'm walking around a conference or something like that, and looking at all these amazing options, I can go, does this fit with I belong, with you belong, we belong? I mean, does this come back to our succinct mission statement? Is this going where we're headed? And if it doesn't make it a bad thing, if it's not, it just means it's not your thing. And I've got freedom to be able to walk away from that and still feel good about where my ministry's headed.
And that's a good way to explain it, because when people hear the concept of developing a philosophy, that scares the daylights out of a lot of people. And really, we all have a philosophy of the way we do ministry, whether we verbalized it or not, whether we even recognize it. It informs the way we do ministry. So just taking a little bit of time and formalizing that, whether it's written down or just a simple thing you've come up with that you've got in your mind that you continue to perpetuate among the people that you're working with, it's freeing. So I go to a CPC and I see this new video-driven curriculum that's just out of this world, and I realize that I don't want kids watching a video. I want kids interacting with people. Kind of doesn't fit what I want to do. Doesn't mean it's not good, just doesn't fit what I want to do, so I go a different direction. So it really helps to evaluate what you're using, what you're trying to accomplish.
I think that when we know why we do what we do, it empowers us to be the voice to people around us. It gives us direction when we're in a new place of why we do what we do, and then we're able to evaluate, does this fit? I think it's super important to know why. Whatever that is, if it's I belong, for me, it's that I'm teaching kids to hear and obey God. But why?
Very good. I as kind of thought about our conversation today, there's so much to talk about when it comes to the formation of children. And the truth is, children are being formed. Whether we've been able to articulate vision, whether we've ever been able to write it down, children are being formed. And so to take that very distinct idea and recognize that we have influence in that, and that we have been given the privilege to speak into the lives of children and to speak into the lives of those who are speaking into the lives of children and who are helping to form and shape their ideas, that we are the earliest image of Jesus to them. And that as we sit in a nursery and we rock a baby and we whisper, Jesus loves you, this we know, for the Bible tells us so, that those early whispers help them to begin to identify, this is a place that loves me. This is a place where I belong. And we don't have 1 minute to waste. And the truth is, we have greater influence than sometimes we know in the lives of families. And so to understand the power of vision, to understand the power of philosophy, for lack of a better word, that word power, to say it really matters that we're keeping some of this at the forefront of our thinking. And Leon, you mentioned Jesus. What a great idea. That we would form our philosophy and our plans and our thinking around the ideas that Jesus brings to us. Jesus the storyteller. Jesus the teacher. Jesus the gentle voice that offers invitation. We have a privilege of being those voices, those things, that presence in the life of the youngest worshipers among us. What other thoughts do you have today? As
I would think that, you know, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, what is next? You know, if you have another children's pastor who's near you or a children's leader, contact them or contact your district director or the other district's director, somebody. Contact NCLN on Facebook and get the next step, whatever the next step is. I think we're all in this together as children's leaders. So find somebody, contact somebody through that system, and to figure out what the next step is.
Yeah, the really, really exciting thing about folks who particularly minister to children and their families is we're not alone. And whether you are a church of 18 people and you have 2 children present, or you're a church of 3,000 people and you have children everywhere, that God raises up this passion inside of someone that says, what about the children? And we recognize that the moments matter. And so you're not alone. And that's good, Trey, that we could look to our left and look to our right and see who we could lock arms with and say, come and do this thing with me as we minister together in the lives of children. Well, thank you guys for helping us think today. And as we think about vision and philosophy and what do we do with all of that and how do we form it, and I think I could speak for all of us to say we want to be a resource. And we don't have all the answers, but we know people who do. And so we want to be a resource. And so thanks for helping us talk about this today and for sharing your thoughts and for helping us learn.